Welcome to the back to school night. I'm Ms. Silvestri, and hopefully you will have your student in AP Chemistry. And I teach AP Chemistry, so I'm the instructor for the class. Alrighty, I want to give you a little bit of background about myself. I currently reside in New Hartford. Last year, my son Jonathan was a senior at New Hartford High School, so he graduated from New Hartford in the midst of all the COVID chaos, and he now is a freshman at University of Rochester. Just like many of you trying to navigate this, either hybrid or online instruction, my son originally really was very excited to go off to school because most of his classes were supposed to be in person. And then once he started school, moved out there, many of those professors indicated or actually contacted him and said, "We've changed our mind, we're only going to do remote." So I think probably 90% of what he's doing is remote. So he gets to sit in his dorm room and take his classes from his dorm room. But that's the time we're in right now. My husband Keith is a 1981 graduate from New Hartford. I do not have the same last name as my husband. I did not take his name when we got married. When I changed my career and left Bristol Myers Squibb for teaching, I think my husband was rather glad. So my first year was very interesting, and where I was teaching, the students always tried to figure out where I lived. I had one student who said that he wanted to burn down my house because he wasn't happy with me as his teacher. It was quite an interesting year. Originally, I grew up in Rhode Island, so I'm a New Englander. You often hear me say that I root for New England sports teams. Yes, that includes the Patriots. So your students might say, I should talk about Patriots or the Celtics or the Red Sox and Bruins, and sometimes the Pawtucket Red Sox, because it was a farm team for the Red Sox. I am originally trained as, and still am, and still consider myself to be, a chemist. My undergraduate degree is from MIT in chemistry, and then I got a graduate degree, a Master's of Science from SUNY Stony Brook, also in chemistry. I actually did synthetic organic chemistry, and I was synthesizing what was called RGD peptides for platelet aggregation inhibition. I worked at Genetics Institute, which is now currently owned by Pfizer. Yes, one of the drug companies making a COVID vaccine, and yes, my friends from Pfizer are working on that COVID vaccine. I worked there for about 8 years, met my husband, got married, moved out here to be with him because he couldn't go there to be with me. And then I secured a job at Bristol Myers Squibb. I left after 3 years because they kept doing this laying off and then hiring back and then laying off and then hiring back. And then the last time they hired me back, they said they wanted me to move to New Jersey. And I said, nope, I'm done. And I went back to school to get my teaching accreditation and ended up in New Hartford after a little while. I'm currently the advisor to National Honor Society. I do volunteer to go out with the kids for the Science Olympiad. And then in addition to things that I do with the students, I am a school tools coach and a tech coach now, because we need tech coaches, for our faculty. And the other thing that I do is New York State Master Teacher. I'm actually coming towards the end of my tenure for a Master Teacher, so I will be emeritus soon. But it's one of the places that gives me very good professional development and allows me to network to get solutions to problems I have in class that either aren't working for me, the ones that I came up with, or maybe I just have to think a little more out of the box. So they're a great resource. If you're interested in some of the content that's taught in the class, you can reach it through my webpage. I do have a disclaimer though, because we've moved so much to Google Classroom in the last 4 or 5 years. I don't have enough time to keep both going with true earnest. It's just too much to balance. So the Google Classroom really has the up-to-date information. And that's the important one because that's how I really communicate with your student. If you really need to get in touch with me, there is a contact section on my page, or you can email me. You've all received emails from me but sometimes they look like they come from school tools. So if you have to email me, it is K. Sylvester. It's not my whole name because New Hartford does the first 6 letters of your last name in terms of faculty and your first initial of your first name. So please be careful if you use the email. But you're welcome to email me. Okay, on to the good stuff. What will they be learning over the course of the year? I first want to really stress, and I think I might be one of the few AP teachers that say this. It's not that I don't care per se what they get on the AP. It's not that it is the live all, end all, be all. It is a number that's assigned to you when you take a test. It does not necessarily measure how much you've learned, grown, figured out who you are over the course of the year. What is my main objective for them in my class is that they understand how to study in the end, that they grow as a student, and that they learn as much as they can in chemistry to help them out when they take it in college. I will recommend they retake it in college. Big discussion with my son on this because I told my son in the end I didn't feel he needed to, because even as a senior he could tell me most everything he learned in Chem. So he hadn't lost it, and Chem was not going to be his major. He's going to be a mechie. So I said to him, if you really score that well and they say you can skip it and you want to skip it to start your mechanical engineering classes, and he's taking Introduction to Bridge Design, because it's actually one of the first required courses you have to take at U of R if you're going to be a mechanical engineering major. And he skipped it. He decided to skip Chem, which was fine with me because he did very, very well on it. But if a student struggles, it's okay. This is not an easy thing, especially as a first AP for many of the students taking the class. This AP really bridges a lot of different areas of the brain, makes them all work together, and it's one of the first courses for many of the students that asks them to do that. So especially the first few months, it's a struggle. But I will say that if your child is struggling in the very first 3 topics, the internal matter, the atom, the periodic table, that's predominantly Regents material. It's not really getting to the AP stuff. AP stuff doesn't start until moles. And what I mean by that, and part of bonding, is that AP assumes that you've already had a first year chemistry. In New Hartford, we do a unique thing of doing the option of 2 years in 1. Some people choose to try Regents to see if they like chemistry and then take AP. But most of my students have never seen any chemistry before, other than what they got as an accelerate in 7th and 8th grade. So it is challenging because Chem is very different than living environment. And most students took living environment or AP Bio Prep, which really is a glorified living environment. And living environment is not bio. So the struggle, the frustration in the science hasn't been there. You know, living environment is shove the material down, vomit it back up on a test, and throw it out. And you don't have to remember anything from it until you take your benchmark, where you just shove it down your brain again and puke it back out and forget about it until Regents. In Chem, it's not like that. Everything we do builds. Everything they're learning now builds. And if a student doesn't learn a method of retention, they will struggle. We will talk about what's called a growth mindset, where you're focused on learning as much as you can rather than the number on the test. It is very hard to have a growth mindset. I got to give my son credit. He's taught me a lot about growth mindset, because a lot of times we get in arguments and he'd say, I don't need the big grade. I know the material. That's what counts. And he's right. He knows the material, and that's what counts. And I would always tell him, but how you prove it is on a test. And he goes, no, how to prove it is if you can really use it. Again, it's kind of hard to say to your son, yeah, you're right. But the tension comes, or the stress comes, because we're so used to indoctrinated until this point of what's your grade, what did you get, how well did you do by the grade. I will constantly remind your children that it's the growth process that counts just as much as the grade is a test. How much have you learned and retained? How have you grown in your study habits? How have you prepared yourself for college? And that's a huge thing. So they start off with, of course, the introduction to matter, which we're just finishing up. They go into the structure of the atom, which we've just beginning. We will talk briefly about the periodic table. We will focus on what's called trending. We will learn about how bonds are made, the different types of bonds, geometry of molecules, and then we'll talk about moles and stoichiometry. And that's where people start to freak out because of the word math. Okay, there's nothing harder than just algebra 1 in chemistry. That's it. You don't have to know anything higher than algebra 1 to be successful. You don't even need to know geometry. You don't need to know algebra 2. Just simple arithmetic. And that's really the truth. In quarter 2, we finish up our stoichiometry. We have a review of the states of matter. We go into solutions, and then we start the stuff that really throws kids for a loop because they've never seen it. And that's kinetics. And usually kinetics, which starts about holiday time in December and continues on into January, is where you see your students' average start to fall because it's all new stuff. Equilibrium is new. Acid-base is new. Redox is new. Electrochemistry is new. So Q3 is a tough quarter. It's leading up to the AP, and sometimes some kids' averages drop 10 points. And that's kind of normal because it truly is stuff they've never seen and can't relate back to something they learned before. Q4, averages come way back up because we go into review for regents. Organic and nuclear are not on the AP, they are on regents, so it's regents level material. And most kids, especially the way I do review, their averages come way back in the fourth quarter, and since the only thing gets on your transcript is an average of Q3 and Q4, I always tell the kids in Q3, don't panic, don't freak out. If you have an 85, there's nothing wrong with it, because when you get to Q4, you usually end up with a high 90s if you're a good student, and then it averages out to like a 93, which is exceptionally respectable for being an AP Chem, if they're fixed mindset and need that number. Okay. Please be aware, the Regents exam is the final to the course. Okay, they're supposed to take the Regents exam for their final, so just be aware of that. Don't plan a trip away on the day of the Regents. Alrighty, you signed some papers at the beginning of the semester. Part of it was the breakdown of grades. There's some more additional information in all those packets I gave your children about how things are graded. Again, moles, stoichiometry, reactions, kinetics, equilibrium, and even some parts of... When I see equilibrium, we also talk about the equilibrium of acids and bases, which is really important. Biology, medicine, very important. That's where kids will have a drop. As far as lab makeups are concerned, well, right now I'm still working out how to do labs at our current situation. My sections are small. I can have one person at a lab table for each cohort, so I intend to do labs, like some form of in-person lab. As far as goggles are concerned, because that's really the only thing to be worried about, because otherwise things won't be shared, and if it's left on the table, it will be wiped down. For goggles, because I do have small sections, your child will be assigned a goggle with a particular number, and it will be their goggle. Their name will be written on the goggle for the year. And when they are done with their experiment for the day, they will place goggles in a hot water soap solution, soaking tub, and they will soak. They will be rinsed by me when I will be wearing protective equipment. and then they'll be allowed to dry, and they will be subjected to UV light for 30 minutes. So no one's supposed to touch that goggle except your child. There will be no shared goggles. If you are uncomfortable with me washing them and me putting them into the UV box that we have and subjecting them to UV light, and you would prefer your child to have their own personal pair of goggles, you are welcome to purchase your child their own personal pair of goggles. But I will be washing and putting them into the UV box for them to use. I have a total of 10 students in AP Chem. It's a very light year for AP Chem. I definitely have enough goggles to assign it to a student and go through the proper precautions. And, is there a guarantee 100% of the virus will be killed? I haven't looked at all the literature, but to wash them in a soapy solution and let them sit and soak, and then to hit them with UV light for 30 minutes, it should remove most of the virus, if not all. So that is my plan. That is what other districts are doing in the area, and what I differ from in the other districts of the area is that by our district, the students are not supposed to be doing collaborative work even with masks on. So for me, because we have a small section, there's one at each lab bench, so they're not going to be near another person. And the lab benches are very far apart. And even if I had to have two at a lab bench, if they are the farthest point apart on the lab bench, it is 6 feet. And there's a way for me to stagger them in the classroom so they're not near each other, even if they're at adjacent lab benches. So it should be good, and my plan is to let them have some hands-on experience. AP says they're supposed to have some hands-on experience. Okay, this is an extremely fast-paced class. We kind of start off a little slow because I feel the foundations are necessary, but then we'll get to a point where we will work faster. If we get a little short of time, I drop out the labs before AP and then we do them after AP, because it's calculations on the tests that matter. When we're done with AP, we do review. We usually try to have a review of 1 week in class. They take a benchmark by right before the AP that simulates AP testing. And then after the AP, we have the 2 topics that are Regents, and then we review for Regents. So after the AP, we get to do some more flexible labs that aren't dictated by the AP, and some of those involve what's called snow globes, making a mirrored bottle. We'll see about methanol rockets. We usually run out of time. We make ice cream in June, and we synthesize esters so they make nice, stinky, smelly compounds. Some of them actually smell really good, and some of them don't smell so good. That all has to do with organic. So hopefully that your student will enjoy their time in the class. They'll understand how to study by the time they get out. It'll help prepare them to be better students in the future, in whether they're going off to college or in New Hartford and then going off to college. But that's my main goal, is to give them an experience that prepares them for college. Again, it's the district that wants to tout the numbers of the AP. For me, it's having them make sure they understand how to study and find a way they comprehend the material. The strange thing to them will be there's more than one way to get an answer. They've been taught for a long time in any New Hartford school, any New York public school, answer in this box and answer this particular way. Make sure you answer so you get full credit on the test. And they will hear me say that too with AP. If you don't word it right or you don't use the keyword, you might not get full credit. But the thing of it is that when you calculate something, or even when you explain something, there's more than one way to do it. And that's something they'll struggle with. A lot of people will ask me, can you just tell me the one way I have to do it? And my answer will be no, because it depends on how they ask the question, how you have to do it. And that's the point. They have to understand how to pick a question apart and how to answer that question. It's not this silly turn the question around. And your kids will come back probably telling you that I went off on a tirade about what's called TTQA. You can't just do TTQA. You have to actually answer the question. So we're going to work on that this year. I hope it goes well with all the different challenges that all of us have and we're facing. If you've got any questions or concerns, please let me know. That's about it. You can look for another video that might be in the classroom. I'm going to try to give you a tour of the classroom since you're not able to come visit it. But the most important part is a little bit about what they're going to expect. So, oh, and the other thing that's new to them, they grade their own labs so that they can tell what they did wrong, where they know the material, and where they don't know the material. Of course, I look at their grading, but they have to grade their own labs, which is very different. I think I am now the only person who does that in the science department. I learned it on an AP Institute, and I have found that has made a significant difference. When I ask the students, would you rather do a bell work or grade your own lab? And all the times I've asked that question in a poll, they've always said they learn more from grading their own labs. So you will see them have 3 lab grades. Is it complete? Did they edit when we went over it? And what was their actual score by their grading and me checking from the lab? So that's why they have 3 lab grades from me. Again, any questions, please let me know. Enjoy your evening. And is it kind of nice sometimes that you can just kind of attend in the comfort of your own home? So, best wishes for the year. Thanks for coming. I should say thanks for watching.